The 2024 NFL season is upon us, and we don't have a name for this show. It's Cris and Ron, and this show has no sponsors, and we just have turned what used to be what we considered a normal conversation. We tried to turn it into a conversation that people can monitor, so to speak. So we shape it so that it's viewable for others. But the idea came about just amongst the way we communicate amongst ourselves privately. And we've had some excellent responses. So to the way we do it. So Ron, how are you doing? You do anything this summer?
A lot of good trips. So that was good. And, this is 2024 version of the two of us. I know that you could be found elsewhere with BetUS and other things that you're doing, interacting with various people. And I'm writing. My writing is out there. There are other shows and there are other things that are going on. But this really is what it's all about, the brainstorming, the process. This is the stuff that I think that we really add value to how we're thinking in terms of getting ready for the season. Once we're in the season, the week to week, quote unquote grind. It's fun and exciting at the same time. To briefly answer your question before throwing it back to you, good focus during the summer, both on vacations and R&R and on the writing and the work. So I think the blend was really good. Really looking forward to what is it? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So I think we're ready for the marathon. And speaking of that, Cris, I know you want to update people with what's going on with your health. I had the great opportunity to see you a few times a couple of weeks ago, and I was pleased that you're really looking much better. So update us on where you are in terms of your own health.
Yeah, right after Super Bowl, I uploaded a video explaining some challenges health-wise that I had been going through. And it's been quite the journey. We typically don't get personal on this show, but because of an overwhelming amount of people wanting to be updated and the importance, I'm just going to take 1 minute to do this. And afterward, I think this is going to be a really good show for anybody watching at any knowledge level, because I'm coming in cold. I mean, cold as ice. And I know Ron's been working it all summer, so we're going to be bridging that gap. But in February, I uploaded a video with a health challenge that I had. And I really, really encourage everybody to seek that video out. If you have not seen it, I shared some very personal stuff that I think most everybody would not expect people to share. Some very personal details that anybody can get value out of. The whole process, there's a lot to learn from it. It's not, a personal gripe thing or a sob story or anything like that. It's practical advice and knowledge. I consider myself very well-rounded, and I shared a plethora of information that, is very, very wise to be aware of for preventative issues and along the way issues. But so far, I've had I had a difficult period of time where I would probably, on the average, have about 1.5 to 2 miserable days a week from recovering. I'm no longer cancer. I no longer have cancer, so that's gone. But I am going to have some sort of change of quality of life going forward. And frankly, it was a little disconcerting for a period of time. I've had a recent procedure that the doctor says this should change things for the better. And it's only been less than 2 weeks, but I think he's correct. So I'm very optimistic on that front. I very much appreciate all the people that have reached out with inquiries and well wishes. And I just wanted to send this out now just so I can try to get it all out there at once. and conserve time, so to speak. So with that in mind, again, thanks to everybody. Please check out that video. You'll really benefit from it. And Ron, I am back to the way that I was doing NFL for over a decade. I'm coming in the 3 previous years. Let's just call them the COVID, post-COVID era. I didn't travel. I used to leave the U.S. I used to travel to Asia for 100 days a year and take the summer off and decompress and take baseball off. And I would come in blind. And frankly, the post-COVID era, I'm sitting here around with nothing but time, and I couldn't travel. So I'm keeping up on the NFL. I'm keeping up on a little bit of college football, and I'm learning more and more and more, and kind of keeping up on it and thinking, well, the more I learn, the better I'll do. But quite frankly, it's been the inverse. So I didn't fare well last year, mostly because of the model. But it didn't feel like I had my act together. I think it was a little overworked and fried out. So, but this summer, I decided to fry myself out with moving instead. So why I think this is going to be a good video is because I'm going back to the roots where I did better. I'm coming in blind. I'm going to play catch up, just like I hope a lot of listeners or viewers are feeling in their own heads is like, hey, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm going to check out the show and catch up. Well, I'm going to try to speed along that process and assume that nobody knows anything because I don't know too much except what I've been keeping up on the timelines on, so which hasn't been too difficult. So with that in mind, shape my mind, Ron. Tell me where I should start to catch up from this summer.
First of all, obviously 2 different approaches, but in the NFL, I wouldn't recommend that approach for serious college handicapping anymore because every roster flips because of all the new rules and so on and so forth. We're not going to get into that, but let me just say college can be a nightmare to keep up in. But in the NFL, it's okay to just kind of wash everything away and come back fresh. The reason I do it my way is simply because it's a process that works for me. I'm not telling everybody to do it my way. My advice would be to find what works best for each person that's listening or watching to this particular video and work with that. You can get power ratings from somebody else. You can read up real quickly in a week or 2 or something. You don't have to watch the preseason games. They're not that important. You can look at the stats, you can look at what's going on and so on. But I write because I set benchmarks. I have these team sheets and I have notes that are going on, through on the front, on the back, everything on here so that I could see exactly what I expect by the time week 10 comes around with that matchup. What I'm looking at as far as this is what happened last year, or this is what I expect out of the new offensive line. So even though I may not care at all about what happened last year, and I don't have to worry about that, and whatever goals I set for this year are going to be changed, I need to know whether it's a plus, minus, or exactly how I felt, because where I may feel it's a sweet spot in the schedule for some team, somebody else may say, hey, wait a second, they look like they've lost 3 in a row. They're really not doing very well. And I may be saying, well, I expected them to lose 3 in a row. So I'm doing a lot of checks and balances. And also I'm doing a lot of future plays. I'm doing some player props, not as many as I used to for various reasons, but a lot of season win totals and so on. And I want to get ahead of the market in these areas. And it's essentially the market changes so early these days that you have to get ahead of the market if you're doing the futures market.
I'm aware that the season's starting soon, but I'm making sure that I feel literally no panic whatsoever to catch up. I mean, I have a pretty good knowledge of what's happened with these teams. I have them kind of categorized in my head. I actually kind of like being able to go in fresh, and I like to see who everybody hates, who everybody likes, and who the bandwagon jumpers are, so to speak. There's value in that, and it sounds kind of silly that I haven't slaved over it all summer long, because you would think that that would affect results. My results were better when I wasn't doing anything at all. So I'm still better off knowledge-wise than I typically would be. But where my perception, the way I feel at this point is, I don't ever recall looking at an entire league and seeing so many teams that could really swing. I just feel like there's potential variance in far more teams this year than ever before. I mean, you can take a look at just about, it just seems like almost the entire NFL. And if that's what you call parity, that's the way I feel when I'm looking at practically the entire league. And I think that that's good to not have a predisposition on the vast majority of teams. And we know from experience that no matter how hard you work, you already mentioned it. We have our situations, we have our look ahead situations and what we're looking for at certain points of the season or when this happens or when that happens. But by the time week 3 hits, that summer work doesn't mean half as much as what we've seen on the field at that point. And then by another week or two, you can scrap that. We have everything to evaluate right in front of us based on the on-field play.
Yeah. Let me add to that or put a capper on that. From May 20th to August 15th, I did this amount, 0 NFL work, because I had all the data points. Once the schedule came out, and all the peculiarities that go with that. We have the draft, the schedule, free agency, the coaching analysis. I looked back at the team stats. I saw what teams were higher performing than they should have based on metrics and lower performing. I did the team autopsies. There was no new data at all from May 20th to August 15th. When I came back from the trip to Vegas, which I came back around August 11th or so, then I could start working on the NFL and refreshing myself and seeing what's going on. And yes, I've softened on some opinions and hardened on others, but it was like starting over. It's not like I spent every single day on the NFL because you do not have to.
I don't know where to really. What do you think? I would most likely feel is important that I've missed, that I'm probably not going to pick up through just a scrolling timelines. So to speak.
I would read back at, now I sent you some stuff, obviously, with the draft analysis and so on, but I would read back on all the coaching changes, first of all. So the first thing I would recommend, if you're saying, you spent the summer wherever and now you want to get back into football, read about the coaching changes. And it's not just the head coach. An interesting tidbit, and this is why I kind of look now at what happened in the preseason. Let's take Tennessee, for example. Very soft zone defenses, bend but not break. That was the previous regime. The new defensive coordinator comes in and he says, I'm going to make changes. I'm going to play more press. I'm going to force teams to beat me one-on-one. So when somebody says that, first of all, I have to look to see if they have the personnel to pull it off. And secondly, I want to see at least something in the preseason that tells me that they really are going to change the way they play defense. And so far, I've seen modest trends toward, yes, Tennessee's going to play tighter defense. And you look at the free agent acquisitions they made a trade an hour ago for the starting linebacker with the LA Rams and so on. I think Tennessee is an example of a team. And so, Cris, in answering that question, I'd say you have a team with a new coach, a new staff, a new attitude. Who are they bringing in? Who have they let go? They let go Derrick Henry, which tells me they're going to be more pass oriented. They're playing a more press defense. So you're telling me that they're not going to be so focused on stopping the run, but they want to stop the forward pass this year, which is really good. Contrast that to another team in their division, Indianapolis, and you don't have a lot of data there. You have the same old staff. They allowed nearly 70% last year in pass defense, even in preseason. And again, it's 3 games with scrubs, but they're still allowing 70%. last in preseason in terms of pass defense. So nothing has changed defensively. You know what you're getting. So therefore, what I would say with a team, if you're studying Indianapolis, is look at the quarterbacks who are going to be able to thrive against soft pass defenses, not the rookie quarterbacks and so on. Look at the teams with good offensive lines. Those quarterbacks are going to thrive against Indianapolis pass defense. So those are the kinds of things I would look at. The new coaches first, and some of the scheme changes that people are promising.
There's two other things that are on my radar. The second one we'll get to are the schedule unfairness issues. That seems to be there's always a few teams that are unfairly scheduled, but I hear that that's much worse this year. But it annoys the hell out of me that they changed this kickoff rule. I'm sick of hearing about it already. I guess I'm just an old fart that is resistant against change. I don't know what it is, but I just don't like it. And I think that all the discussion about it in preseason was a waste of time and energy, because we didn't see who's really going to be doing these kickoffs and exactly what their true in-game strategy is going to be. So it just seemed like literally, routine nonsense, so to speak. We have to wait through week 1 and week 2 to really assess what the kickoff rule is how the kickoff rule is going to affect the game. What are your thoughts on the kickoff rule?
Yeah, several thoughts on this. Some teams decided that they would use the kickoff returners that they're going to use preseason to the regular season. And some, based on the data I have as to who is expected to return kicks, didn't even let them touch the field. So in my opinion, even though we looked at about a 3 or 4.5 yard difference in terms of where the possession started, and I think from that standpoint, the NFL got what they wanted. More kickoff returns, a little bit better field position because the NFL likes scoring. I think we have the potential to see even more advantage to the return team when the better kickoff returners come in play. Now, conversely, I don't think the teams that kicked off showed every type of kick that they're going to use. We haven't seen what I've mentioned a long time ago, and others like Steve Fezzik have piggybacked on it. We haven't seen those line drive kicks that you want to really get at where they may muff the ball or they're going to go right through the end zone. We haven't seen them pull out all the tricks in terms of on as they're kicking off, how are they going to prevent teams from going through? Well, what you have seen is 2 kickoff returners, and I have a pretty clear indication that when the ball is kicked, one of those returners is going to move right away to be the lead blocker for the other returner, creating a little bit of space right away. And the other thing I'd mention is that from game to game, you're going to see changes. If a team's up 14 at halftime, they're going to start kicking through the end zone. If a team scores late and they're up by 2 or 3 or 4 points with less than a minute to go, they're not going to want to have a return. That kick is going to go through the end zone and they're going to start at the 30. So kickoffs that you see in the first half might be different than kickoffs you see in the second half.
Yeah, my thoughts on it were that I think we're going to see some funky. I mean, they try to kill the clock as often as they can, but I don't think that they respected the fact that they were leaving time on the clock and would have to kick off as much as they're going to have to going forward. I think that there's enough question in what can happen on these kickoffs that offenses are going to want to burn that clock down. They're not going to want to, because what was the return rate? 10% previously, and now we're expecting significantly higher. So you want to avoid that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just one aspect of the game. At least now you're not going to have the situation where a team scores, then there's 3 commercials, then a team kicks it out of the end zone, then there's 3 more commercials. So at least there's going to be some flow to the viewer and maybe even some flow to the teams themselves.
What do you think the average field position will be?
I've heard people talk about that as, I heard on your show that 27.5 to 28.5. I personally think it'll be the 30.
Then
I
why
think
not
it's going
just
to
kick
be
it out of
more.
the end zone?
Yeah. Well, but then we're going to find out whether or not I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, it's going to be because they're going to have these funky kickoffs that don't go out of the end zone, that forces teams to maybe bobble it or something like that. And then you have to wait on who's going there and teams can adjust. I think it's going to be the 30 because I think there was an emphasis on drafting. We had 3 years where kick returners went undrafted because there was no need for them. And now we saw a few good returners go in the 5th round, for example, Anthony Gould of Indianapolis. We saw Cordell Patterson be picked up immediately by the Steelers. He's the all-time leader in kick return TDs. So I think we're going to have better players play on the return game team as well.
And if ball's out of the end zone or out of bounds, is that at the 35?
I think it's even the 40 if they don't kick it between. It's really weird because in college you're taught to kick one way, and then when you get to the NFL, you're going to be taught to kick another way if this rule stands the test of time. So you can actually have the ball if it's miskicked as anywhere from the 35 to even the 40-yard line if you don't hit that neutral zone place where the ball is supposed to land.
Okay, that makes a big difference. So they definitely don't want to be mucking around. I was going to say if it was the 35, you could play around a lot more. A 40 would be a brutal result. So
yeah, it kind of changes the dynamics of the game, shortens the field and so on. We talked about this offline about how it affects player stats because you're starting from a different point of reference in terms of the field. So there's all kinds of subtle implications for the gambler.
Well, yeah, and just so that we're on the same page, it should lower some player stats. It's not going to help improve player stats. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It may allow the same number of pass attempts because you're more comfortable starting to pass from your 30 or 40-yard line as opposed to if you start at the 20 and you might be conservative, you want to throw a pick six or do things like that. So there's certain stats that might be flat, but there's other stats that are going to be more positive. Maybe you have a couple more plays in that if you get 2 first downs, you might be in 4-down territory as opposed to 3 first downs. But you're also going to see the clock run on more kickoff returns. So you have about a minute less of play in an average game, which is going to be 2 or 3 fewer plays.
Yeah, there's a lot of give and take on that with the extra clock running to prevent the kickoff from even happening. And the extra clock running during the kickoffs, that has to work against the increased expected scoring. So I'm not sure it's as open and shut that you can put a value on the increased scoring as was being some people were predicting. I think it can hurt it too. Anything else on the kickoff, or you want to move on to scheduling?
Let's move on to scheduling because that's really a sore topic because the NFL preaches safety and they stop the hip drop tackle and all that other stuff. And yet Warren Sharp started this, but I've been doing schedule analysis and I published the 8-page schedule analysis report, I'd say for a dozen years now. And this is by far the least fair schedule in the history of the NFL. You've got more teams than ever, 3 straight road games. You have more teams playing a road game after a road Monday night game. So you have East to West Coast trips that are ridiculous. You have some teams making 4 or 5 separate trips from the East Coast to the West Coast or vice versa, usually West Coast to the East Coast. You have teams playing 3 games in 10 days, 3 games in 11 days, 3 games in 12 days. I think there's 9 such instances. And there were something like 3 in the last 10 years or something. And now you have 9 in 1 year. I say this because people handicap differently. I have a 3-pronged method. I use power ratings. I use matchup analysis, how a team's offensive line looks versus defensive line, key metric stats, sacks, so on and so forth, and situational analysis. Now, a lot of times power ratings do not come into play because it's the game is fairly lined. A lot of times situational factors do not come into play because there's no adverse rest, there's no revenge, there's no tight game last week or something like that. There's no coaching beefs or whatever there is. So it's all matchup analysis. But this year, people who do just technical analysis, I just say to you and others, buyer beware, to me as well, because you're going to have power ratings that you're going to have to say, well, I can't trust the power ratings because this team is playing their 3rd straight road game against a team that has 14 days off. Or this team is playing their 3rd game in 10 games, and this team is playing a conventional Sunday schedule. I just think the situational factors are going to throw models off for a loop in some cases. And I think it's a terrible look for the NFL.
I'm disappointed that I don't have this information to volunteer, but I guess it's something to comment on it before I find out. I just feel that last year, if you were chasing closing line value, that wasn't a formula for success. It seemed like it didn't seem like I had any problem getting closing line value last year, but results were mediocre. Any thoughts on looking back on last year, on any anomalies or feelings that you have based on that, since it kind of touches on what you're talking about?
Yeah, 2 thoughts on that. Most of my autopsy analysis is based on how I performed team by team, what the expectations are and so on. Where did I find out, was I right? Like I was right. You and I were both right about what Philly was. Their record didn't indicate that they had flaws, and we jumped on that earlier than other people. Where I was wrong, undervaluating a healthy Matthew Stafford with the Rams. And I think I was a week or two too slow, maybe even 3 weeks too slow to say, wait a second, this is a different team than what I had anticipated. So in terms of line value and so on, I play it differently college to the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to college as you try to figure out what rosters have changed and where your power ratings have to make tremendous adjustments. Paul Stone is very good at that topic, and you really have to be on top of it more than ever early in the season with college. With the NFL, I feel like all the information is out there, and any changes, maybe I'm wrong, so you could comment on this. Any changes that happen Friday till Sunday kickoff are more roster based in terms of this guy is hurt and he's not playing, or this quarterback is this or that or whatever. Any moves that happen in the NFL, they seem to happen pretty quick, and the line gets really tightened into place. Not so much maybe the over-under, but the line, the regular line on a game gets tightened into place really fast by sharp people.
Well, I fear that the regular season is going to become more like the preseason was this year. I didn't do any preseason because I don't like to burn accounts. Account preservation is important to me. The books don't want your preseason that moved, that you got 3 points to the best of it. And by the same token, I noticed that when those preseason lines move, boy, do they move fast and hard. And the one thing I have recognized with the regular season NFL, they were already starting to get too fast. I mean, last year lines moved faster and they moved harder than in years past. You didn't have a lot of time, and they weren't afraid to move. The time it would take, back 3-4 years ago, the time it would take for a line to move from pick to 2.5 or 3 seemed like 3 times as long. I mean, they might do it instantly now. So, and after coming out of a preseason like they just had, it may even be faster. Any thoughts there?
I mean, the preseason is a whole different animal because it really matters. If you have quarterback competition, you're going to try harder than teams that do not have quarterback competition. Example of why week 3 preseason moves so fast is because there were a few teams. Indianapolis, for example, was one of them. Let me see, a couple of others where they played their starters for a quarter and a half, because that you have between week 3. I don't know why the NFL has a bye between week 3 and the start of the regular season. I think it's just a gap until they get 18-week season so they could fill it in personally. But I would be all in favor if I had a coach, especially if I had a new coach or I had a quarterback situation or I had a lot of roster uncertainty, of playing starters in week 3 of the preseason. But only about 6 or 7 of the teams followed that model. But when you found out a team was going to do that against a team that wasn't going to do that, lines flipped by a touchdown or more. So, everybody's going to play their starters now. You just have to figure out which guys, and we're getting this information now because we are literally 30 minutes away from when rosters have to be at 53. So from that standpoint, we're getting cuts, and then we're going to get roster moves, and we're going to get people placed on the PUP, physically unable to perform list, and we're going to get people on short-term and long-term IR. So we're getting this information, which may affect week 1 lines, but I think it's just services jumping the gun a little bit and moving a line. But we're not going to see crazy times in terms of NFL moves. Except for totals.
You know what? I am actually the only thing that the NFL has done recently that I do like is that gap. I love this extra week. I just think it's perfect. It just is like a soft, fluffy pillow.
I like it too, because it allows me to not lose a week in college where I can get in that, and then I can ease into the NFL. When they do away from that week, I'm going to be, I don't know, hopefully retired from this, but it is an easier feeling this week.
But I'll tell you something. We know that they're going to add an 18th game, and I hope the Players Association. I would love to see one preseason game in exchange for that 18th regular season game. It's just ridiculous. It is so awful to see these injuries in preseason. The players don't want to play it. The fans don't want to pay for the tickets. We don't need it. We're getting a useless product forced down our throat. And you could absorb whatever lost revenue that is. I mean, for all the money they're raising through TV revenue and increased ticket prices, and now they're allowing owners to sell 10% of their teams. There's plenty of money there. Let's start doing what's best for the players, and that's fewer games. That's fewer situations where they get injured. And I know they get injured in practice and. They're going to get injured anyway, but when you see a Penny Sewell go down and limping off, you don't want to see that in preseason. You want these teams at full strength facing each other at full strength. And the highest probability you have doing that is to have fewer preseason games. But I'm sure that's a pipe dream. Maybe we'll get 2, but wouldn't 1 be the best?
Well, hamstring injury is going to happen because people are going to rush this, that, and that, whatever. This year is weird in one sense, and the NFL better get their act together in this regard. Colleges play 12 games. They have 90-man rosters.
Yeah.
And they have this year, because of the schedule, 2 bye weeks each team. The NFL plays 17 games. They have 53-man rosters. They have the unfair scheduling situation that we talked about. Colleges, it's usually Saturday for the most part. And here in the NFL, they got Thursday, Wednesday, they got whatever. And they have 1 bye week. if the NFL Players Association, when they go to 18 games, does not insist on 2 bye weeks, it's a failed process.
Oh, I think that's a done deal too. I think that's already been discussed for sure.
It better be.
I left that out.
Yeah.
Where to now?
Any particular teams that anybody who's and thank you for everybody who's here. All our favorites are here, and those that are listening that are not able to make comments. It's, we love the comments. Any particular team anybody wants us to talk about, what our initial thoughts are. Cris coming maybe a little bit more blindly, but things are getting through. He's through osmosis, he's getting some information, and me maybe more tactfully in terms of what's going on. Any teams you, Cris, or anybody else want to talk about as far as where they may be right now?
I think if I had to pick a team that is getting way too much love, and the more I look at it, the more I believe it, is Philadelphia. I mean, I'm not saying that they can't be a great team, and I can't say they can't win at all, but they are according to way too many people, they're just predestined to win it all. And I think their road to success is going to be a lot harder than people think. And I know there's favorable things in their in their favor, but Philadelphia underperformed what they were doing statistically last year. They cost me money down the stretch. And part of that was that I think Sharp mentioned it, is teams know how to defend Hurt. So it hurts. He was far less effective, and they haven't done anything to address that. And he's what makes the bus go forward. Mm-hmm. He's the wheels on the bus. So any thought, what are your thoughts on Philly?
Well, it's a dilemma because based on Pythagorean theorem principles, they were a mediocre team last year. They didn't deserve the record. We knew that. I knew that. The playoff loss was expected, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, based on their turnover ratio, it negates some of that, because I don't think this team is going to be double-digit minus turnovers again. And each turnover in the NFL is worth 3.5 points. You'll just have to trust me on this. So that's kind of a balancing act. So now that we look at their opponents, it's still 2 games against Washington. It's still 2 games against the New York Giants. We look at the fact that Dallas passed them last year. So Dallas is going to have the harder schedule. When we look at the mouthpiece of Dallas, Jerry Jones, who sat on his butt, from, as he always does, all during the draft, during free agency, and so on. Whereas Philadelphia manipulated the draft, they manipulated free agency. They've added another wide receiver to make that wide receiver room deeper, which I like. They got Barkley. On paper, this team is just better than Dallas. The 2 questions I have are what you said. Maybe 3 questions. Kelsey at center is a tough replacement. Their head coach, I'm not sold on him. And the scheme with Hurts bothers me a little bit. But I expect this team to be much better. And as you and I talked, and I do have those divisional I have those 10 and 20 minute videos on my YouTube page. That's another place where you could catch up and stuff like that. I did discuss this. I had Philadelphia plus 130 and plus 135 to win the division. And I think anything less than a divisional title would be really telling for this coaching staff.
Yeah, I forgot about the loss of Kelsey, and if they were to get off to a bad start, they could dump the coach. I mean, he's got such high expectations, and it's been a while. Could they lose their patience with him mid-season?
I don't know about midseason, but I honestly think if they finish second in the division and they're one and done in the playoffs, even if they won 10 games, 11 games, that he would not be back the next year. Favorite to get fired early would be Dennis Allen.
I just, we contradicted ourselves because, and we both were right. Philadelphia just dropped off the map last year. They cost me money, later in the season, and you were right. By the playoff season, they had dropped so much. It was, Tampa Bay was a strong play. So it was just fascinating to me to see a team with such high expectations, just nosedive. And when you have a team like that, I can't be enthusiastic about them. That was my only point.
Let's talk. We have several and I don't think we're going to get to all of them today. But let's start off because the first one I saw a team that somebody wanted to talk about was the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're fascinating. This is another dilemma team for me because on the one hand, you had back-to-back good drafts, which is a low positive correlation to team success. You have a team ready, willing, and able to go through brick walls to play for their head coach. And then you have this schedule that's made out of some other planet where they play in a tough division. The last 8 games include all of those teams, plus San Francisco and Kansas City. It's an incredibly unfair schedule. And then you got these quarterbacks that are so incomplete in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. What do you do with them? Arthur Smith, offensive coordinator. On the one hand, I like any team that has TJ Watt on its defense. On the other hand, I don't know how they have a winning record. What are your thoughts?
I've got no idea how they're going to do it. And their numbers seem higher than they should be. And that always makes me, wonder. For all the people that dislike Pittsburgh, the last time I looked at their numbers, they still seemed way too high. And there's something that is unknown, more than likely. The market doesn't lie usually. So if the market says that is still holding Pittsburgh at this level, yet everything you hear is down at this level, there's something we don't know. We're not factoring in. There's some variables that there needs to be more awareness about. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate with myself in this case because I'm kind of bearish on them. Their division suddenly looks a little vulnerable. When I took a deeper dive, and I'm about 4 days away from finishing my entire NFL previews, only about 40,000 words this time. When I looked into Baltimore, it's a problem. I mean, they lost a lot of talent from that team, including 3 offensive linemen. You never want to lose a lot of people cluster positions that way. And they're always one Lamar Jackson injury away from mediocrity. And they've got that first place schedule and so on. This is not going to be an easy task. We don't know how ready Joe Burrow is. I have a feeling he is going to be ready, but there's still uncertainty with the Cincinnati defense. And Cleveland, I don't know. Their home road splits were atrocious last year. And is Watson an advantage to have him or a disadvantage to have him? If he plays league mediocre, maybe they win the division. Is he capable of playing league mediocre? So maybe in devil's advocate form, Pittsburgh's number is higher because maybe the division isn't quite as fantastic as we think it might be.
Well, again, it goes back to the point I made from the beginning. You can look at that entire division, and I would think the most agreement you could get is that the Bengals are due for a good season, but there's still some doubt on that. So it's not guaranteed by any means. I wouldn't term it a Yahtzee division because I can't entirely, but it's almost close to one. And but this is going to be an interesting year for Cincinnati, in my opinion, because are they going to rebound and become that powerhouse that a lot of people think they are? And they did a lot with a little last year to get to show signs of life there at the end. But They finished in last, didn't they?
Yeah, so they have
Yeah,
a fourth
I mean, we
place
said it
schedule.
last year. The same show last year, I believe, it's not impossible for the Bengals to finish in last in that division. So
No.
I think it would be more difficult for them to do that this year.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about Cincinnati, but when we looked into this and we talked a lot about the different divisional odds when I was talking to you about Philadelphia months and months ago, again, before May 20th, because we didn't need to do anything after that. So Philly was the team. I was cautiously optimistic and looking to see if I could get a plus 250 on Cincinnati at the time. I said, I think they have a chance in this division, but I didn't see anywhere close to that. I think it was plus 180 at the time I was looking, and I was saying, in this division with their schedule and some uncertainty at that point in time about Burrow's readiness, I didn't think those were fair odds. So I don't think there's any divisional future I would make in the AFC North.
What did I do here? Keep talking. I lost my.
Okay.
I'm stuck in
Well,
a page.
you know what's a fascinating team to me, and it is to one person who put it out there as well with all the hype. And this is something that I'd rather have somebody like you, Cris, coming in a little bit cold to talk about. The Chicago Bears, who had a really wonderful preseason. If you look at their August work, it was really good. But you're asking a rookie quarterback behind what I still think is incomplete offensive line to play 17 games. Again, another coach like Philadelphia's coach, who I'm not completely sold on, Eberflus. They have a pretty good defense, probably a top 10 defense. They've upgraded the wide receiver room. There's no question about that. I don't know. There's something about Chicago, and I've said this to a lot of people. Until they beat Green Bay, I have an issue with them. It took Buffalo a long time to learn how to beat Bill Belichick in New England, and once they did that, they flipped the switch. When does Chicago beat Green Bay?
Well, this division is awfully interesting. I know that. I don't, you've got a guy that's coming out of college, and I think Stroud's performance last year and people seeing that a guy can come right out and excel may distort the realities of the situation, because the reality is this guy had a great line in USC, and he wasn't, I mean, he would be running. Every time I saw highlights, he's just running around. He had all day to do stuff. And maybe I'm wrong, but nobody seems to disagree when I tell him that's my perspective. He's not going to have that time. I want to see what he has in him. I think he's a good player. I think he's got a decent head on his shoulders, but I think he's going to have a harder road, and that there's going to be some difficulty. And I also think the Bears defense, overperformed at the end of last season for various reasons. I'm not so sure that they're not going to have some issues there. Their offensive line is still complete garbage, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people are building it up because they've added a lot of players to the offensive line. They've tried. My problem is, for most of the players they've added, they either came with injury risk or they were not rated as draft NFL-worthy players. I had these guys. I agreed that they should have taken 3 offensive linemen. I think it was in 2022 and a couple in 2023. But I disagreed with the linemen they actually took. So I'm down on the players selected. I like the strength in numbers, and maybe one of them becomes a diamond in the rough. But overall, I don't have the I would probably rate the offensive line as in the 18 to 22 range.
I'm not sold, and I'm putting this in the same category as Philadelphia. I'm not sold on Jordan Love. I thought him getting that contract was absurd. I was surprised that he has actually started 18 games. I didn't realize he started that many. I guess he had, but there were some metrics that he did not perform well in. He also faced teams that he should have had success with, where he had some of his big games. He may very well be a great quarterback. I just haven't. I don't have confidence in it. I put Purdy in the same category. Hey, it all worked out for you. Do it again.
Purdy, I'm okay with because he had a 4-year body of work at Iowa State. So I'm good with him. That was a good last pick of the draft choice. Love would be out of the league if he had to start like some of these rookie quarterbacks have started the last 2 years. He was so incredibly not ready to be in the NFL. And all this time sitting has made him a better quarterback. There will be the occasional bonehead throw, as we saw in the playoffs when, the game was on the line and he had to make a play and he forced things and he reverted back to those Utah State days, I think it was. But he's learned a lot. He's become a lot more accurate. I'm okay with him in terms of where his development has been. This has been a long process for him, but a necessary process. But he sure got paid a lot. That's something. Green Bay is a very young team. They've got to grow on the fly, but I kind of like what the coaching staff has done in this transition period of time.
Well, as I'm reading some of your notes, they've got fewer true road games. They get a nice chunk of primetime games too. So we'll have to see how they respond to that.
Absolutely. And they have some easier games versus uncommon opponents, but they also have a very tricky stretch in the middle of that season, I think. Back-to-back games that are very difficult. And I don't think they've proven they belong with the big boys yet. They're in transition, but they're closing the gap. And that's what I need to see, whether or not they've completely closed the gap.
They don't feel like the Lions of the year before where,
Yeah.
this team is solid.
They don't feel like that, but they're close. They feel like Green Bay last year a little bit when there was some uncertainty about Green Bay. We didn't know which way it went, and they surprised us. I don't know that a lot of people will think Chicago will be surprised or Chicago fans will be surprised if they do that well. But there's people on both sides of the fence, and I'm going to be doing my schedule grid where I handicap each game in the next 48 hours and stuff like that. And I want to see where that fits, because right now I'm still, as they say, bearish on the Bears a little bit. Contest question. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just figured since we're in the division, I'd comment quickly on Detroit. Detroit's got one of the most serious Achilles heels, kryptonite situations in the league that I never hear anybody talking about. And that's my concern for them. And what makes that even more shocking is that they have chosen to only carry one backup quarterback, Hooker. So they cut the other guy, I forget his name, starts with an S, and they're going with Hooker, and he's got his ups and downs. He was sacked 5 times in the first 5 minutes the last game, and then he did well afterward. But he's all over the map. And if Jared Goff goes down and you only have Hooker to come in, that's going to change a lot on that team.
Yeah, and this is one of the topics we've discussed offline almost each and every year is the value of a backup quarterback, because we could be talking about all these teams or what happens if Jalen Hurts goes down, what happens if Jordan Love goes down. Regardless of our feeling for him, he's clearly the best quarterback on that roster, and there's going to be a drop. What happens when Aaron Rodgers goes down, Kirk Cousins goes down? Backup quarterbacks are important, and we're getting a replenishing of quarterbacks from this last draft. At least we think we are. If you look back at the 2022 draft and the latest quarterback traded, Malik Willis, each of the top 5 quarterbacks have been traded now. And some draft classes, you're so high on, people are so high on quarterbacks that are drafted, and then you find out the whole class was a wash. It's a tricky position to evaluate. So we don't know whether this class is going to be the better of the classes, but I think it is because they're the older of the classes. You got Penix with 60 starts and Nix with 60 starts and so on and so forth. Caleb Williams with his athletic ability, but not all classes are built like that. And so we're dealing with a lot of backup quarterbacks that will fail.
I'm too close to the situation, which is why it's always important to have models and exterior information that's going to control your decision making. So being too close to the Lions, it scares me a little bit. So I'm a little apprehensive. I'm trying to play it safe and not drink the Kool-Aid. They've covered the spread 70% of the games over the last 2.5 seasons. The only other team that's done that are the Patriots in their prime. So that's another reason to be cautious with these Lions. They've been making everybody money for too long. So something to think about. That's from a betting angle. But I think the team has the right attitude. I believe that their goals are the Super Bowl or bust. I think that goal is realistic. I think they are technically a better team than they were last year, and they have that experience. I think I mentioned it before. If they would have gone to the Super Bowl and got embarrassed, I think that would. I like the fact that they lost to San Francisco, and I think you have to take steps. Oftentimes, if you're really building a long-term powerhouse, and you're not just a fluke, take those steps, earn your way, earn your stripes, so to speak. But as I mentioned, if Goff goes down, that's a big wild card. But they're in pretty darn good shape. So there really is no excuse for them. They have a tough schedule, though. I think they don't have their bye until week 14. That's tough. And out of the gate, early season revenge against the Rams. The last thing I'm going to be doing is laying the Lions -3.5 or even 3. I'll sit that out. I think that's a tough game for Detroit. And then I forget who they play right afterward, but those are dangerous games for a team like the Lions for whatever reason.
So they're the deserved favorite in the division because they're still young in Green Bay. There's still some questions we just phrased about Chicago Bears. And while there are pluses to Minnesota and reasons that they could be okay, Sam Darnold's not going to hold up for 17 games without a plethora of interceptions. The Lions, the pushback on the Lions, 12-5 was not their correct record last year. Plus 52 or so point ratio. It's really closer to 10-7. So don't think that they were a legit 12-win team last year. They have a lot of talent on that team. That's why I don't understand them sometimes on draft day. I don't know if they have the number 2 wide receiver on the roster. They hope they do with Jamison Williams. And I certainly don't know if they have a number 3 on the roster. And I just don't understand why they didn't give Aiden Hutchinson another running mate, because Hutchinson makes everybody better, but wouldn't it be nice to not triple team him all the time?
All valid points. And we'll know a little bit more after the cuts. So I was surprised to see Houston was like a borderline whether they're going to keep him or not, because he had that huge run at the end of the previous season with them as bookends. So that's my only kind of void in understanding why Houston wasn't more locked into that role. So
let me shameless plug here. On Thursday, we're going to be back reunited with Ted. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a roster cut impact show, because people will already be down to their 53-man rosters, and then teams will poach from the cuts, and they'll be redesigning their roster. I have about 8 or 10 teams that I have thoughts on at that point. So maybe we'll have that topic on Thursday.
I think as Tommy says here, the hesitancy with the Lions also a little bit is we love Dan Campbell. He's a player's coach, but he's not an X's and O's kind of coach. And we've seen him step in it a few times, and he's going to step in it again. And I think that's a little bit of our fear also. I mean, I just can't count on him to make all the right decisions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of superstar talent on that team that maybe the other teams in their division, they don't have. But no one's going to overlook the Lions, that's for sure. They're going to get some best shots. They're in primetime games. They have to be better this year to achieve close to the same record as last year. That's just a given.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. There's a difference between being the hunter and being the hunted, and they will be a hunted team, even though they didn't win it all.
Talk about contest week 1, because that was an interesting question. I can't talk to that because I prefer straight playing, but you got a question up there about contests, and people are entering contests left and right. And if you don't do it right week 1, you're either out of Survivor or behind.
Well, quickly on the Survivor thing, I don't generally play Survivor just because there's too much luck involved. You can put yourself in the best position possible, and your 17-point favorite decides not to show up, and that's just brutal. I haven't 100% decided not to play this year just because for various reasons, but as I just told somebody who asked me this morning a few things, I said, listen, it's real simple. You can't win if you play what the herd plays. So you're either going to play it to win it, or you're going to play it to goof around. So you make the call, because you can't win it if you play what everybody else is playing. And, you know, the Bengals have lost game 1 the last 2 years in a row. When you have teams that are not playing their starters and they come in cold and they're playing teams that are hungry and are going to get up against you, guaranteed, well, strange things happen. So one could make a case for not wanting to, a few cases for not taking Cincinnati that are logical. But the alternatives, you've got, a handful of teams there in the middle that everybody's going to gravitate to. So you might want to go a little deeper than that. But if you're playing to win, why not take risks right out of the gate, is my opinion on those on that type of a contest. As far as the pick 5 contest, there really, I haven't noticed any real patterns of dog favorite, that sort of stuff being advantageous. Those are the most difficult weeks. Probably week 1 is as tense as week 18 if you're vying for any sort of money or prize or something, because you don't want to start off down. So your natural instinct is, I'm going to play this safe thing. I'm going to play you're playing safe numbers. You're leaning home teams. You're just doing all the square things. You're trying not to make mistakes, and you can't win. You have to be aggressive. You have to try to be different. You're going to have to take risks at some point. You're going to have to get lucky. There's no patterns as far as that you can just blindly follow in contests that are going to give you a leg up, opposed to week 1 betting. There's some certain things you can do, but my number one advice is the money is gone. It's expendable money. You're not getting it back. Play it forward as if you're not getting it back, and play the game aggressively and play to win. If you're playing defense, if you're playing not to lose, don't waste your time. Seriously, there's just too many people in these contests. It's too much to overcome.
My recommendation from a non-contest player in general, I have recreational contests, is that not for week 1, but for week 2. This is your early reminder to not overreact to week 1 results. Because if you want to go contrarian week 2, you're going to have plenty of opportunities as people go on week 1 bandwagon because some team won 28-0, San Francisco over the Rams 8 or 9 years ago, and they won one other game the rest of the year. So what you have to do is almost cleanse your mind after week 1. Maybe you pick up a few pointers from rebuild offensive lines or new coaches, and something that happened in the secondary or with the pass rush. But other than that, be aware that teams that win week one may not be as good as they look, and teams that lose week one may not be as bad as they look.
Bo Nix does seem to have some value. A lot of his player props seem to be out in the Never Land. I'm sure they tightened up recently, but it's possible he could do some damage. What do you think?
Let's see what the question was about. Short passing screens. Yeah, as far as leading in yards, I don't see that happening. The MO for Sean Payton is surprisingly more run oriented. He kind of used the old John Madden approach. You pass to set up the run. And I think if you look back at some of the Sean Payton teams, they were actually fairly strong in the trenches as far as running the ball and defending the run when he had the teams that he wanted to have. Now, is he going to have more confidence in Bo Nix being accurate and evading the pass rush as compared to Russell Wilson? That's pretty obvious. He certainly hopes he has a Drew Brees type, and Nix has had plenty of game experience, as we talked about. But leading the league in, no, I don't really see that. In terms of a candidate maybe for a rookie of the year, that's possible.
Well, I did hear some commentary that Bo Nix is going to get a lot of time coming from behind. He's going to get more passing. He's going to get more garbage time type stats that he's able to pile up. So that's why there's been some interest in him developing.
Okay. Yeah, it really depends on. I mean, I haven't looked at those markets. I tend to rather use yes/no markets as opposed to index markets. I'm not a player in terms of MVPs and this and that, whatever. I'd rather have fixed choices because the VIG is just too high otherwise.
So I said this was coming in. So,
most passing yards for rookies. Okay, so who are we talking about? Caleb Williams, which would be a threat. Michael Penix isn't a threat. Daniels, I don't think will be a threat. His running yards would be a threat. And there's one other quarterback who's going to start that's a rookie. Blanking out right now. But yeah, Nix would be in the mix. I expect him to be healthy, although he wasn't that healthy in college.
We haven't said a word about, barely said a word about the AFC East.
Ooh, the AFC East. Boy, I have questions about all the teams there. But in terms of something I want to bring up on Thursday, I feel a little bit better about my Jets to win the division, not because when I did it, it was plus 270 or plus 275. I think you did that too. But it's just because I have doubts about Buffalo and Miami that haven't gone away. The biggest problem, I have two problems with the Jets. One is Aaron Rodgers. The guy's a head case. And I really don't like to invest real money on head cases, but apparently I am. Or maybe I'm investing it on the defense. But the other problem is they have a schedule where they have 7 standalone games in their first 11 weeks. Now, Rodgers could probably handle it, but the youth around him, and it's a very young team around him, they've done some great drafting and stuff. Can they handle all these standalone games and short weeks and all their eyes on them and stuff like that? In a normal environment with a 4th place schedule and a typical Sunday schedule, I would love the Jets in this spot. I kind of like the Jets in this spot. I just hope they can manage the landmines that have been dealt to them. Do you have any feelings on? Yeah.
Where does their defense stand compared to last year?
A little bit better, I think.
How is that possible? If their defense is better, then
little bit better because they had to compensate for bad quarterback play last year. And if Aaron Rodgers can keep them on the field longer or can actually score points, not crazy about their coordinator, but their offense has really picked up 3 new offensive linemen, another new wide receiver, Rodgers healthy, 4 running backs that could run the ball. If they can hold their own, then the defense actually plays fewer plays this coming year.
Miami has been, other than Tua's comments about the previous coach, Miami's been completely off my timeline pretty much for the entire for months. It's amazing how a team with high expectations just seems to be blending into the woodwork a little bit. Do you get that sense? Am I missing the boat on something, or are they strangely silent?
I think they want to be under the radar.
Right.
Best case scenario is that they're going to do incredibly wonderful things again offensively because they're ahead of the curve. They're kind of an Andy Reid-like in terms of innovation offensively. So I like what they bring to the table offensively. Problem I have is they have to stay healthy because this is one of the least talented rosters 1 to 53 that you're going to find. One of the most talented rosters 1 to, let's say, 15 to 20. Some of the defense has flaws. But when you get from 21 to 53, this isn't a good roster. And it's because they've drafted 14 players in the last 3 years. It's because one of their last 8 draft choices from the previous 2 years is playing and the other ones are not. It's because of offensive line weakness. And there's a lot of reasons why they have to stay healthy. And it's a tricky schedule. And they didn't win against playoff teams last year. And they have to prove that they can do that. And they start the season with 2 guys in the front 7, Chubb and one other guy not healthy. So they start behind the 8 ball that way. But their ceiling is high because of the speed they have on their roster.
What about this AFC South?
Man, I change every day about the AFC South. First, I like Indy. They could be last. They could be first. Then I like Jacksonville. Lawrence is healthy. They could be last. They could be first. I kind of like Houston because they didn't stand pant defensively, but night and day different schedule they're going to face. Night and day different night primetime schedule from 0 to 4. Uncommon opponents are brutal. Tape on Stroud. And then I think Tennessee is under the radar improved. There's so many reasons why I think, other than quarterback, I'm scared about Levis. I'm scared about Levis. But if he has a decent year, like a league average quarterback year, Tennessee is going to surprise a lot of people. So this is a crazy division.
Well, let's go back to the comment that I opened with is going down the AFC. I think we can agree that New England is not going to have a good season.
I hope not.
God only knows the range of seasons that Buffalo, Miami, and the Jets can have. It's pretty wide. It's not as narrow as people would like to think. You brought up Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. We lean towards Cincinnati winning that division, but we don't know for sure. They did the same thing last year. They finished in last. So we still only have one team that I think we can say for sure we know what they are. You look at this whole AFC South, you don't know who any of those teams are for sure. We do know who Kansas City is. So there's our second team. You don't know what the other 3 teams are. Let's go to so we have 2 teams out of the AFC. AFC East. I lean toward the Giants not having much hope this year. I think Washington has range. I think Philly has range. I think Philly and Dallas have narrow range, though. I think things could go south for everybody in the North. I think Detroit will still be okay, but maybe Detroit. We can depend that they're going to be a good team. You can forget it, the whole NFC South. We don't know what any of those teams are, and we don't know any of those teams are going to be horrible. Look at the whole NFC West. Arizona could potentially be a big surprise. We don't know what any of these teams. We have less than 5 teams in this entire league that we know what they are for sure, as far as my opinion goes.
Uh-oh, I got a comment from Russell. I'm telling Jeff Dawson. Oh, is that about New England? One thing you said that cannot be underemphasized. I mean, people should really listen to this. Range. When you said the ranges of these teams, that's really important. And that's part of the not forming concrete opinions, because these ranges are crazy. I agree completely. Detroit's range is limited. They're going to be some sort of playoff team. And Philly and Dallas, based on the fact that they play Washington and the Giants twice each, I think their range is more concrete. The rest of it is, I mean, what do you make of Seattle, for example? I mean, I don't know. They look better. They love Pete Carroll, but they're going to love this new coaching staff. Geno Smith has a ceiling, but the rest of the team has a wide range of possibilities. If Seattle might be the poster child for what's Seattle, I don't know what their final record is going to be right now.
Oh, I think they could have a great season. The only thing I do know is the price on San Francisco to win that division is too high.
Yeah, there's some optimism about the Rams that might be warranted, although I hate each of their tackles. I think Stafford masked problems with their left tackle and their right tackle, and their left tackle is going to be suspended for a couple of games anyway. But there's some optimism with the Rams. I think they have a better schedule, much better schedule than the 49ers that may have the worst schedule in the history of the NFL this year. Are they good? Yes. Do they have the 4 best players of any team in the NFL? Yes. But they've got some defensive holes that are not being talked about.
Well, and they're going to start with I know Kupp is going to be out the first 4 games they announced today.
Okay. Yeah,
right.
See, I have to catch up on that. I think I already know what 3 topics are going to be on Thursdays. So there's no question we didn't exhaust the range of brainstorming that we're doing today.
So I haven't said anything completely insane. That's why I don't care about these futures this year. I just think that I would rather be more reactive than to have any predispositions. My only predispositions are that there are a wide range of possibilities with almost all of these teams. And with that in mind, let's play ball. Let's see what's happening.
Yeah. So we appreciate everybody who tuned in for our initial show. And I think we're going to try to keep it noon West Coast time on Tuesdays. And we won't have any games played yet, but we'll have more concrete thoughts next Tuesday. And then tune in to hear us talk on Thursday with Ted. I think we're going to have a lot more detail about what's going on with each of the rosters. And I think I'll be able to bring up a few of the different rosters that really took shape over the last 48 hours, let's say.
For the people that joined late, please review. We opened the show. I updated my health issues. I did not respond to the well wishes. I appreciate greatly. Thanks. And try to keep this to football. And sorry for going off topic a little bit. We'll be back Thursday at noon. Are we doing Thursday at noon with Ted?
I heard just this coming week, Thursday might be an earlier show. So wake up a little bit earlier.
Oh, that's right.
For that one.
Did you want to do 11 on that? Okay.
You want to do maybe even 10 o'clock. So 10:30. We'll be back Thursday, and we'll certainly clue everybody in that we're coming. And shorter show, but we'll get a lot of detail on that one.
Okay, we got it. Thanks a lot. Until we see you guys again, we really appreciate everybody joining. And I'm at the new house here, and everything's a mess, and I'm just trying to get organized. So everything's discombobulated.
1 year exactly with me being in this new house.
It sucks moving. All right. See everybody Thursday. Thanks.
Bye.